Greetings. Sending you all some warm, positive vibration. So much to do. um, and just reflecting while I was here working in the garden, which is always, I encourage everyone to grow something, even if you are in a colder zone, a colder climate in the city. I invite everyone to grow something. So relaxation. You don't need to be in the tropics to start to grow some food. I started growing food in an apartment. So every now and then I just reflect, on the lessons that I learned from that experience. And I also, I sit back in the cut and just watch as more folks in the Afro community um, are learning the patterns, as there are a few people that have taken on a community responsibility to put information out, and very slowly, teeny tiny amount of people, one, maybe two, people have spoken out about their experiences in cults. And I often wondered initially, I wondered why usually pattern. Anytime you're wondering like, how come this? How come not? How come that? Things stand out on your radar. It's usually a reason why. You just may not be familiar with the patterns yet. So I used to wonder, how come people that I've seen come and go in the experience I had, and other people, you'll notice a pattern that quite often people disappear and they don't speak. And so I figured out before, but it's even just continuous confirmation that folks are so focused on coming to terms with what they have experienced, getting clear, getting getting reacclimated. That they just don't have the time, maybe perhaps to. Their first priority may not be sharing their experience, particularly in a random environment where folks don't have a frame of reference for their experience. So much has come forward that it's been a continual lesson. These patterns of cults, I know for my own being, understanding and comprehending how I was vulnerable and how I was open without demonizing or making myself bad or wrong. Because I know as a mature adult, um, yeah, I didn't come there to my experience broke or, fortunately, I paid my own way. I had traveled, I had done some research, but, there's some basic lessons that I learned. But even if you communicate with people through these screens, hopefully by now people can see on their own that you just don't know people on the internet. And there's several things, so much I can't even get into one video. But there's some lessons by now we should know. And one of them is to get a thorough vetting process. This is not just for cults. This is for anyone that we're letting into our personal life. A vetting process. And for young people or the unaware, what do I mean by vetting process? A way to thoroughly research and cross-reference and hold yourself in check before running away with the words that sound so eloquent and crafty. Yeah, that makes so much sense. Because by now we can see that anyone can manipulate the quote unquote truth, information that you have never heard before, can manipulate you at your most vulnerable points when you're facing a life crisis. We see so many young people that now, right, there's been enough information that's come forth for people to see patterns that usually young people or younger adults that are young adults, right? And they're still at a vulnerable stage, right? You don't know it all in your early 20s. But in your early 20s, there are many young people that don't have their parents or don't have a safe space with people to confide in. Many are homeless or, out engaged in all kinds of different activities, may not have a place to go home to. Some hard-headed, some traumatized, some figuring that the cult has to be so much better than where they came from, all the while not having a frame of reference for what they're about to experience, not being privy to the fact that other than what they see through the screen and the selected information that's being shared with them, they most likely won't know until they're too deep into it that a lot is definitely not going to be revealed to you. only when you have proven allegiance or when you have been thoroughly broken. So I had had some life experience in my encounter, and so that is actually what enabled me to walk out and leave. You know, there was so many things that don't add up. And today, as I was moving in the garden, it just hit me every now and then. You know, a memory will hit me. And there's so many times where I had to even myself question, like, wow, did that really happen? Or even in my own mind, trying to justify, right? Um, as a natural default, looking for the best in people, which can be dangerous, being extremely idealistic. That is very, very, very dangerous for people who you haven't vetted or because their words sound good. We've seen this now with churches, chocolate and vanilla, all kind of pseudo spiritual groups, folks that are trying to identify you because your parents come from the same place. You know, it hasn't panned out. Everyone needs to have a thorough vetting process where you thoroughly pause, you thoroughly investigate people before you go exposing yourself intimately to them, and also being very careful of who you go to for help. Be very careful. It's a fact, many folks that are older, right, folks that are predators or manipulators, they get older too, right? And you got to be very careful who you're going to for help or for comfort or for solace. When you are looking for comfort, you're wide open and vulnerable. You're wide, greetings. You're wide open and vulnerable. There have been so many times where I sat, with my own being and also with my sister. And it's not fortunately, it's not the focal point of our life, but I can never forget, the lessons. I mean, we got taken to school big time. PhD, master lesson. I had no idea what I was encountering. And, the trade off of what the payment is going to be for the help or the guidance that you're asking for. This is what young people and even some of the, maybe even quote unquote more mature women, they're not banking or don't have a frame of reference for, or are so desperate, which I'm not going to demonize, but you're still going to get the end result. Don't care, throw caution to the wind out of desperation. And so I don't think that we learn a lesson just by sitting back eating our snacks. I think we can really miss a big opportunity for collective growth and not stopping to ask, like, what lesson is there for me? I think as a culture, we have a tendency to look as voyeurs through the screens, right? And I think, what kind of lesson can I garner from this? Right? Because we make the error to think that people in general, of all ages, cannot be manipulated. I would say, in my humble observation, if you think it can happen, we're being manipulated all the time, right? And we're moving at such a pace. It is not hard to manipulate people. Those are some of the people that are most easily manipulated. If you look at some of the previous cult leaders that may be more popular in media, they can manipulate the police officers, court judge. These are human beings. They can scan out your and scope out your insecurities, which all human beings have insecurities, things we may have shame about or feel guilty about. Some of these things we may exacerbate and make them bigger than life. So I really feel for the young people, but there's enough information now. And by now, we can clearly see what many of us are like, how can somebody go there? You can sit right now and go on some of these newer social media platforms and you can watch it unfolding before your very eyes. The amount of women and men, young adults, some older, you can watch before your very eyes people take their money out of their pocket and support something. So if we just take a minute to comprehend that there's something that these figures, something that the person I dealt with as a father figure, a safe male, an icon of somebody for my offspring, another mentor, role model. That's something that he represented for me, right? And it's something that the women were there that they represented for me that was very utopian. Again, that can be very misleading, very, very dangerous. That can be it is very, very dangerous because folks may be thinking that they're in a hot situation, but there's just stuff that you don't have a frame of reference for that you may not be able to bank on until way after the fact when the damage is done. Folks have no idea what they're going to be exposed to sexually or maybe taken for granted what they're about to encounter, that they don't know, folks. So this is not the season to be listening to people's words and making judgments where you're putting yourself and your person and your private sacred parts and your finances and risking going into debt and risking emotional and psychological damage that you hadn't banked on. This is not the time to go by sweet words on the internet. At the same time, we can surmise many people will. And usually manipulators know where to go for their audience, and can pack up shop and set up shop again in any kind of area. It's not hard. It's really not hard. I hope that's something that people comprehend now. There will always be people, there'll always be customers and people right for manipulation. So my heart goes out to folks, that don't have a frame of reference, but I could just recommend to folks or make a suggestion is cross-reference people. Cross-reference. For example, some of these folks, do you know any of their peers? Several of their peers. Are you able to get to check out their character, their past wives, their treatment of their children? Many of these co-leaders don't, they'll show you a big image of family and you don't know all their children. They don't take care of all of their children. And yet people are sending them money. It's absolutely astounding. So we know the human mind is not logical. And so just like marketers and the system of supremacy has taken the time to invest money and time and thoroughly researching and understanding our triggers and our psyche, so have manipulators. And they come in all different colors and shades. And so the impetus today for me to come on and to speak was I just share a little something. I don't share too much. And I'm even thinking about taking this content and moving it to another platform. I think I'll always leave something here for folks. So just so they can research and cross-reference, that could have made a big difference in my experience had I had more concrete evidence when I was doing my research. But I was thinking of one time where I was sitting in the so-called Royal Hall that my sister and I contributed with our finances to many of their structures. One is sitting here now in Belize that's looking dilapidated, but that's another story. But I remember, right? I remember sitting, and I was sitting. I don't know if they had banned my family member couldn't come into the public gathering. They banned her, right? Now looking back at the isolation counseling. They banned her from coming in for something that she says. Constantly, you were getting in trouble for breaking the rules and you didn't even know what the rules were. You're like, it was like a crazy making thing. But anyway, I was sitting amidst in their royal hall on the floor, because we sat on the floor. And I was sitting amidst all of these large cockroaches. I mean, sometimes I would just have to be brushing them off. And so that was the time, sometimes around when the season changes or around rainy season, you can see like a whole lot of termites come. I mean, like droves, because these folks talking about their nature. Not, I mean, we were in a clearing, more like bush, but definitely much more nature. These folks are not nature. They're like little resort hotel Airbnbs. But in any event, there were so many large cockroaches. And let's see if this guy's still talking. I was sitting and these cockroaches and I remember sitting there. And I remember thinking like, I'm not going to complain, because that's one of the things in the cult pattern. You don't complain. And so it's almost like this thing to see how much you can take, like a hazing, just how much you can take to prove that you're living by principle, or that you're, a star student, and that you comprehend the principles, and that you're really loyal. It's how much you can take. And I just think of some of the things I submitted to. Definitely with my sister and I, again, we've discussed that at length. Some of which you'll see in most cults. You'll find usually some type of dietary regime, or vegetarian, or some kind of eating protocol, some type of dress protocol. Those things in and of themselves aren't wrong, but the context is everything. And so one of the patterns that you notice is that usually the cult leader, with their assistants, cronies, or flying monkeys, whatever you want to call them, their assistants, are controlling the narrative and keep that narrative and the language in place at all times. There's an effort to wipe away your memory by assigning a new name or several new names. The literature would change, the different rules would change, not being allowed to read other books or listen to other music. Depending on the context, the person that's new to the cult is so wide-eyed and so happy and thrilled for something new. Ouch, for ants, to be belonging to something different, because we that is something natural that's exploited. You're needing to belong to something, and so you probably won't notice, or even things that come up that you question, you kind of rationalize and justify them as you have your eyes set on the goal in utopia, right? Many times I've sat back and watched people as they observe say, wow, I'd rather, when they had no knowledge of these different cults and cult leaders, or even the one that I was in, saying, wow, I'd want to be there too. Oh, elder, just drop any kind of keyword. Brother, sister, nice outfits, red, gold, and green, we're all looking like got some raw food or some locks. Our critical thinking, our vetting process goes down, right? And so these are not new patterns. At this point, there's more than enough information for folks to educate themselves, and which I always recommend folks educate themselves. I would never recommend that someone go out and go to hurt people. You know, I would never, because they're women and children and folks that are born into a cult. They don't know any better. I can even say at this point, even the cult leaders, they can say things that are actually quote unquote the truth, but they didn't make up the truth. They don't have the monopoly on the truth. If they're predicting things, you can see again, there are consistent patterns with all of them, all of these, all of them. And so ultimately, only you can decide, like, do you really want to be controlled? Do you have a desire to be controlled? Many of us just don't want to deal, so we'll place our life and decision making into others' hands. And I'm sure for the folks that are there and that have been there for years, some folks probably not going to leave at all. And once you have babies and stuff, it's even harder to remove yourself from it, because especially as women, we're emotionally now we're bonded. We're like bonded and you form bonds also in relationships with other people inside of the cult. So there's so many lessons, but I just had this. It just came to me, like me just sitting amongst all those cockroaches and things that I did to um, just make sure I was living by certain principles, and you kind of start to slowly chip away at your common sense. You're being told we live for the whole, because it can be kind of confusing, because you're thinking these principles, they make sense. Us living by the whole, us living in unity. But somehow your common sense and what you'll tolerate and you overlooking things, it increases more and more. And when you're isolated, it becomes even kind of imperceptible over time. So we're holding on to these principles and concepts. And if you really are interested in eating healthy in a principle or a concept, you'll do it all on your own, whatever environment that you're in. So just send everyone some warm, positive vibrations. Something maybe for you to consider is, what will you tolerate to show how down you are? How different is that from a ride or die? Whether that's on a rap record, a cult of one, a manipulator, an abusive relationship, or a group cult. There's a lot of peer pressure. I think of the many times where I wanted to leave, and you're talked out of it. I mean, the patterns I've seen of like 1000% on. The outfit may change, a bit. The lingo, all of them have their own little lingo. They borrow from each other. So the time is right for cults. Many people are always going to go towards cults or be easily manipulated. And I wonder, as more information comes out, like all the people that were supporting them, and some that become aware of some like very blatant information, just fade quietly into the background. And you don't hear many people come out and say, oh my gosh, I can't believe I was following this person. Some do, some have. So I feel compassion, because I don't know. I think that maybe at some point, maybe some folks, and maybe this one could have had good intentions. See, this is where you start rationalizing. But then if I listen to some of the stories of manipulation, the fantastic stories, Yeah, and that's a pattern too. The fantastic stories they would tell me were just so, and even if you're telling an unaware young person, that's like, I can't deny the manipulation. So the thing you want, you just want something to be so bad. You just don't want to think that it's possible that someone that you trust can manipulate you. So by now, there's enough information, just like there's enough information about so and so system of supremacy, there's enough information that we can reckon with that manipulators and now narcissists come in every package, on, and it's global. One other thing to consider as women, as mothers, I contemplate just the breeding ground. Like, how do we all, male and female, contribute to a breeding ground for narcissists, and how do they become this way? So I invite us also to consider being very intentional with parenting and the folks that we are bringing, that we are allowing ourselves to portal onto this side, to be very, very intentional, male and female, about choosing to parent, making sure you're prepared. So, should something happen, first of all, choosing very carefully, right? Understanding you're going to be a steward of a little human being, right? That's going to grow into a full adult, and um, there needs to be some security, some consideration for the values that you want instilled into them, understanding the environment that you were bringing children into, because a lot of the children whose parents were emotionally not present or neglectful, exposed to drugs or substances. There's so many are wide open to be manipulated, wide open. And these folks know this. They know that no one is coming to check, and it's been said, no one's coming to check for you. No one, and that people don't really care. People where it's there's a climate where folks are, and I even understand a lot of the distraction is folks trying to cope. So just us not being very picky and choosy about who we're choosing to reproduce with, and the music and the current culture. These are the things that these cult folks would take these simple truths or these simple facts and manipulate them and to control the narrative. And so they understand the climate of rap music. They understand the climate of neglect of children, so it's wide open. And they're just trying to scoop up more members. And in their mind, a narcissist's mind, they feel like, some of them feel like very justified in manipulating people. So as an elder, a trusted person said to me before they passed away, when I came out of that experience, she said to me, she said, you know what? A lot of people have a need to be controlled. You just are not one of them. You are just not one of them. So, fear of what's going on in the world. One of them, a big one, two big ones, two big ones. Just so many people having STDs out of ignorance or out of desperation, exposing ourselves to different things. That was the one. The shame for many people out of that, or shame, or the sexual abuse and mishandling. These are some of the primary things. Oh, that was the other thing. So many women desiring, believe it or not, this may sound so overly simple, to lose weight. Or go into cults to lose weight. It's absolutely amazing. I've heard even the cult leader use this whole thing with several people, and even speak to me. Like, I was initially wasn't interested in the cult. I was interested in the food preparation class. Oh, I want to take a class. And when I look back, some things that are undeniable, I'm looking to take a class, and they start pointing out, you have an issue with your skin. Something's wrong with your skin. And these things may seem overly simple, but there's a consistent language to go after your insecurities. So initially, when they appear to be a good listener and they want to hear about your relationship, and you just start opening up everything, revealing everything to folks, be careful who you go to for help and counsel and advice, because quite often you may not know what their agenda. You may have one narrative and one agenda, and they may have a whole nother narrative and agenda for you. So that being said, moving forward, breath of air, I'm out here in the garden, still gardening. That was something I wanted to do the whole time. And so I really feel good about the work my sister and I have been putting in, looking at the tomatoes and the broccoli rabe and the celery and the carrots. Um, they're simple things, but it represents a lot to us. Creating something out of nothing, creating something out of nothing. So, all you folks, be encouraged. Keep your thinking caps on. I invite you to look at what are the take-home lessons. What are the lessons in our quiet moments? What are we to get? Like, let's press pause for a moment on the entertainment. What are the lessons for us to learn that we can just put in our cap so we don't have to read to the best of our ability? We don't have to revisit these things. Are there perhaps some things we're not addressing? With that being said, y'all create a great rest of the day on purpose. Take care.